Hey guys, welcome to our second 2023 College Football Bowl predictions video. So part one, we did cover every single bowl game up to the 19th. And now for part two, we will be covering from December 23rd bowls all the way until the December 26th bowl. So there'll be 10 bowls total. There's about 41 bowl games this season. We are breaking it into 4 parts. The first 11 was part one, and now we will be concentrating on the next 10 here for part two. We will be looking at who we think is going to win, lose, and what we predict the final scores will be. So let's go ahead and get started. The very first game that we'll be looking at is our Saturday, December 23rd game at 12 p.m. on ABC. We have the 76 Birmingham Bowl. That's 11-2 Troy versus 7-5 Duke Blue Devils. Troy does come into this game as 8-point favorites here. When you're looking at these teams, so you have a Power 5 team versus the Group of 5 team. Duke, with their starting roster, had everyone come back to play, they would definitely be the favorite team. They had a really hot first half, and then everything basically fell off the rail. So Riley Leonard did get hurt. He missed a bunch of games, and then when the season ended, he did transfer. He is now the quarterback for Notre Dame going into next season. So their starting quarterback is gone, so they'll be starting Grayson Loftus. And then you have Troy sitting at 11-2. They have a very solid offense. They have a very solid defense. For Duke, they also did lose their head coach. Mike Elko is gone. He is now the head coach for the Texas A&M Aggies. So Duke is leaderless. They lost their coach. They lost their quarterback. They had a lot of players go into the portal. They have since hired Manny Diaz as the head coach, but he's not going to be coaching this game. So Duke has a lot that's counting against them right now. When you look at the team stats here, so Troy comes into this game. They average 31.2 points per game. Duke averages 27.8 points per game, but that's obviously with Riley Leonard at the starting quarterback position. On defense, both teams have pretty solid defenses. So Troy only gives up 17.2 points per game. Duke gives up 19.8 points per game. So they both have top 30 defenses as of right now. But like we said, Duke has lost their coaching staff, they've lost their quarterback, and they've had other players that went into the portal. So that's why Troy comes into this game as the favorite team. Troy's main staple is they have Watson at quarterback. He's closing in on 3,400 yards, 27 touchdowns, and only 5 picks. And they have a really good running game. They have Vidal at running back. He's closing in on 1,600 yards and 14 touchdowns. So he's top 5 in the country running the ball. So Troy can do a lot of things. They play solid defense. They can pass. They can run. I have Troy winning this game 24-17, but just not covering that spread, but getting a really solid win and their 12th win of the season. The next game that we'll be looking at is at 12 p.m. on ESPN. We have the 6-6 Arkansas State Red Wolves versus 6-6 Northern Illinois. This is the Camellia Bowl. Arkansas State does come into this game as 1-point favorite. So this game is virtually a pick'em right now. Now, when you're looking at the two teams, for Arkansas State, they do have Butch Jones as the head coach. Yep. That's the same Butch Jones that was the head coach for the Tennessee Volunteers, what seems like a very long time ago. If you remember, I think it was like game 1 or 2 this season, they lost the game or something like that, and he was shown on the sidelines crying, and people were just trashing him after that. But props to them. They did get to 6-6. They did get to 8 bowl games, but Arkansas State, their defense is just horrendous. They give up so many points per game. They have a decent offense. Both teams are pretty similar on the offensive side, but it's where the defense, where these teams are going to show where they are different. Looking at some of these team stats here. So Arkansas State does come into this game. They are averaging 27.8 points per game. So that's about a little below average. And then you have Northern Illinois comes in at 25.3 points per game. So they don't have elite offenses by any means. They're probably ranked around 60 to 70th in the country on offense for both teams. And on defense, Arkansas State gives up 31.2 points per game. So they get torched constantly. That's why they're only 1-point favorites here. They have the better offense, but their defense gives up so many points that any game can potentially be a shootout. For Northern Illinois, they only give up 21.2 points per game, so they definitely have a top 40 defense. And that's one of the main things that's going to be separating these teams here. For Arkansas State, they have Rayner there at quarterback, but Illinois, they are going to be looking to just basically keep the ball on the ground with Brown. So he's closing in on 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns. They have a very good running offense. I think that with the rushing game, they will be able to control the time of possession, control the clock, run the ball, play really good defense. I have Northern Illinois getting the win, so I'm going to go with that +1. I have them winning 31-24. So they get the W, and we're going with the +1 there. The next game is at 3:30 p.m. on ABC. We have 11-1 James Madison, who got into the top 25 this year. Then they lost, and they were out of the top 25, but they had their best season in recent memory. They will be playing 8-4 Air Force. This is the Lockheed Martin Armed Forces Bowl. So obviously that's why Air Force is playing in this bowl game. James Madison comes into this game as 2.5-point favorites here. With these two teams, they both had really hot starts this season. So James Madison got all the way, I think, to 10-0, lost the game, won their last game. So they are 11-1 right now. And then you have Air Force. I think they got up to like 17 or 18 in the college football playoff poll, and then I think they've lost 3 or 4 games straight. So they did not finish the season very well, but this is a very solid team. A lot of people had them going undefeated this year. So this could have been a 12-0 Air Force versus a 11-1 James Madison. But nonetheless, they did lose a couple games straight. With this matchup, James Madison, although they are 11-1, they lost a lot of pieces this offseason. So the coach, Cignetti, took the Indiana job, so he's gone. So their coach is gone. And then the quarterback, Jordan McLeod, who went off this season, he went into the transfer portal, so he's gone. So although they played really good offense, they had really good coaching, both of those things are now gone. So they have no leaders, just like the Duke Blue Devils. They've been completely stripped on the coaching side and on the offensive side. A lot of people went into the transfer portal. So looking at the team stats here, James Madison, they averaged 35.2 points per game, but obviously that's with McLeod at quarterback. Air Force, they average 27.6 points per game. But look at the rushing yards. Air Force runs for 275.8 run yards per game. That's second in the country. Air Force, they're just going to run the ball over and over and over and control the clock, keep the ball out of James Madison's hands with their backup quarterback. And on defense, both teams have pretty solid defenses. Madison gives up 18.5 points per game, and Air Force gives up 17.9 points per game. This is a 2.5-point spread here in favor of James Madison, but I'm going to go with Air Force to get the win. They have their coach back. They have their whole team back. No one can transfer from Air Force. This is a very experienced team, and the roster is way better than 8-4. I have them winning 28-20. So I'm going with that +2.5. They're just too good, and James Madison has no one coming back to play this game. So that's why Air Force should control it pretty handily. The next game that we'll be looking at is at 3:30 p.m. on ESPN. We have 6-6 Georgia State versus 6-6 Utah State. So a battle of the state universities. This is the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, and Utah State comes in as 1.5-point spreads here. So this is another game that is virtually a pick'em. When you're looking at this matchup here between these two teams, both teams have questions at the quarterback position. Both teams have god-awful defenses. So looking at the team stats, Georgia State comes in. They average 25.8 points per game. That's bottom half in the country. It's not bad, but it's definitely not anywhere near good. Utah State, though, they have one of the better offense right now. They average 34.1 points per game, but obviously they have a lot of questions at quarterback as of right now. The main question is we just don't know who's going to be starting at quarterback. As of right now, everyone thinks that it is the Wyoming transfer, Levi Williams, that will be starting at quarterback. The main question there is he is going to the Navy. I think he's going to be trying to join the SEALs or something like that. But as of right now, he is going to be playing that final game. So he is positioned to be the quarterback there. On defense, both teams are pretty bad. So Georgia State gives up 30.8 points per game. Utah State gives up an even worse 33.8 points per game. So both of those teams are in the bottom 20% of all of college football. They have really bad defenses. So the main question here is who's going to play the worst? That's the main differentiating factor there. I have Utah State here getting the win, winning 30-23 and covering that spread. The reason that I'm going with Utah State is although both teams' defenses are complete garbage, they do have a pretty good offense. So they should at least be able to hopefully outscore Georgia State. So I have them getting the win and covering the spread. The next matchup that we have at 7 p.m. on ESPN, we have 6-6 South Alabama versus 6-6 Eastern Michigan. This is the 68 Ventures Bowl, and South Alabama comes in here with a massive spread, a spread of 15.5 points. So they basically have South Alabama beating the brakes off of Eastern Michigan. And there's a reason why they have that. So when you're looking at the team stats here, South Alabama comes in, they average 30.9 points per game. That's very respectable. That's top 40 in the country. And Eastern Michigan has one of the worst offenses. Now, it's not Iowa Hawkeyes bad, but it's pretty bad. They only average 20.3 points per game. But both teams have decent defenses. So South Alabama gives up 21.9 points per game, and Eastern Michigan gives up 24 points per game. So their defenses are pretty similar, but South Alabama is averaging over 10 more points per game. That's a pretty big thing there. So looking at the quarterback position, South Alabama is better in every single offensive position. At quarterback, they have Bradley closing in on 2,700 yards, 19 touchdowns, 7 picks. They have Webb at running back closing in on 1,100 yards with 16 touchdowns. And they have Lacey at wide receiver, hoping to get to 1,400 yards, and he has 7 touchdowns. So South Alabama, that's why the spread is so big, because their offense is just way better than Eastern Michigan. I have South Alabama getting the win, 34-17, and covering that massive spread as well. The next game that we'll be looking at is at 7:30 p.m. on ABC. This actually looks like a pretty fun game to be watching that weekend. We have 8-4 Utah playing 7-5 Northwestern. This is the SRS Distribution Las Vegas Bowl. Utah comes into this game as 6.5-point favorites here with this matchup. So Utah had some really high highs this year. They got into the top 10 for the playoff poll. They had a couple losses. They had a lot of injuries this season. They did drop a couple games at the very end, but still a very strong year for Kyle Whittingham. I've been saying the whole season, Kyle Whittingham is one of the most underappreciated coaches in the country, one of the best coaches, because he takes 3-star players and they come out and they beat and are way more physical than 4- and 5-star players every single season. So do not overlook Utah. But 7-5 for Northwestern. So they did fire Pat Fitzgerald at the very beginning of the season. David Braun did step in, got them to a bowl game. A lot of people had them only winning 2 to 3 games this year. So the fact that they got 7 wins, massive props to Northwestern. Utah is the favorites here. They've had a lot of injuries. Their whole defense is basically second string right now. Everyone's banged up, and they still put together a top 20 defense somehow. That's just how good Kyle Whittingham is. They did have a complete quarterback carousal. Cam Rising got hurt at the very beginning of the season. They went with Johnson. They went with Barnes. Johnson's in the portal. Barnes is in the portal, but I think he's playing this game. He said that he will be playing this game. So they do have Barnes there, but Cam Rising will be coming back next season for his 15th year in college football. The guy's probably about 40 years old now. But looking at the team stats here, Utah averages 24.5 points per game. Northwestern 22.8 points per game. That was the biggest knock on Utah, was they just couldn't get first downs. They had a really bad offense, but they had a really good defense. They only give up 19.8 points per game. That's top 20 in the country, and Northwestern gives up 23.8 points per game, which is actually not bad considering how bad their offense is. So their defense is on the field the whole game, and they only give up 23.8 points per game. I have Utah getting the win here. To me, even with the injuries, even with the transfer portal, they have the better coaching staff. Kyle Whittingham always figures out a way to win and keep games really competitive. I have Utah winning here 24-17 based off of their run game and their solid play on defense and special teams, and they also will cover that spread. The next matchup that we'll be looking at is at 10:30 p.m. on ESPN. We have 7-5 Coastal Carolina versus 7-5 San Jose State. This is the Easy Post Hawaii Bowl. San Jose State comes into this game as 10-point favorites here. So that's a pretty big spread. Looking at the matchup here, Coastal Carolina. So Grayson McCall is gone. Seems like he's been a college quarterback for about 7 to 8 years now. He did have that really big 2020 season, and then he's completely fallen off the rails since then. But he did go into the transfer portal, so he will not be playing at the quarterback position for Coastal Carolina, but they will be rolling out Vasco at quarterback. For San Jose State, they got off to a really bad start this season, but they had a pretty good second half. So San Jose State was the team, I think it was week 1, that played USC pretty close that first half. So they could score some points back then, but both of these teams have the same record, and they're both trying to get to 8 wins here. Looking at the team stats. So San Jose State comes into this game. They average 33.3 points per game. Like I said, they have a pretty decent offense. Coastal Carolina, they average 28.0 points per game, but some of that was with Grayson McCall at quarterback and not Vasco. On defense, these teams are pretty even. Coastal Carolina, they give up 24.7 points per game. San Jose State gives up 25.8 points per game. So virtually deadlocked on defense, but we do see a difference there. San Jose State has the better offense. Coastal Carolina did lose their quarterback that's been playing there for about 7 years now. So that's a massive loss. Basically kind of creates a void because he was the face of this team forever. He's gone, but Vasco will be rolling out. I have San Jose State getting the win here. They have the better offense. They have the better roster as of right now because everyone's coming back. I have them winning 35-27. So they'll win. They just won't cover that spread because I still think Coastal Carolina will be able to move the ball and they still will be able to score. The next matchup, we will now be moving on to our Tuesday, December 26 games at 2 p.m. on ESPN. We have 7-5 Bowling Green versus 5-7 Minnesota. This is the Quick Lane Bowl. Minnesota 3.5 point favorites here. This is one of those odd games because Minnesota was not bowl eligible. They did not get to 6 wins, but I think there's 84 teams that we need total for bowls. There wasn't enough 6-win teams, so Minnesota squeezed into the bowl, and even though they're not a 6-win team, they are the favorites in this matchup. So Minnesota is led by PJ Fleck. I do like PJ Fleck. He's a really tough coach. He gets a lot out of 2 to 3 star players. Now, they never have a good offense. That's their biggest weakness. Usually they have a pretty solid defense, but they can't score more than 25 points per game. That's what holds them back. But they play in a pretty tough conference, a very physical conference. Bowling Green, they're at 7 wins. They did beat the brakes off of Georgia Tech earlier this season. So they're trying to get a win versus a Power 5 Big Ten team as of right now. Looking at the team stats here, Bowling Green averages 26.3 points per game. Minnesota, 20.2 points per game. Like I said, their biggest issue is always scoring points. They can never get first downs. They can never score. But the Big Ten is really tough, and the Big Ten is probably the best defensive conference in all of college football. Looking at the offenses, both teams leave a lot to be longed for on the offensive side of the ball. But their defense, Bowling Green only gives up 23.5 points per game. So a pretty solid defense. It's probably around 50th maybe in the country. And Minnesota gives up 26.9 points per game. So they usually have a solid defense, but not this season. But their offense is so bad that the defense is on the field the whole game. I have Minnesota, though, getting the win. So like we said, they come into this game as 3.5 point favorites. I have them winning 27-20 and beating Bowling Green, covering that spread. They come from the Power 5. They come from the Big Ten. The Big Ten is tough. There's really good teams in the Big Ten. So I think Minnesota at 5-7 is better than Bowling Green. So I have Minnesota getting the win and technically getting bowl eligible through their bowl win. The next matchup that we'll be looking at is at 5:30 p.m. on ESPN, and this has the potential to really be a shootout here because this is 2 high-scoring offenses. We have 7-5 Texas State versus 6-6 Rice Owls. This is the Serve Pro First Responder Bowl. Texas State comes into this game as 4-point favorites here. So with Texas State, they have a very solid offense. Just looking at the team stats here, let's just look at those first. Texas State comes into this game. They are averaging, as of right now, 36.0 points per game. That is top 30 in the country as well. That's actually top 20 in the country right now. Rice has a top 40 offense. They average 30.3 points per game. So like you said, both teams have pretty good offenses, so everything is being set up to be a potential shootout. On defense, Texas State has a very bad defense. They give up 33.8 points per game. That's another thing that's kind of leaning towards the shootout mentality is they can score a lot of points, but no matter who they're playing, they're going to be giving up a lot of points. Rice gives up 26.7 points per game. Both teams have pretty decent quarterback play. That's going to be the deciding factor here. So you have the LSU transfer, TJ Finley. He is closing in on 3,300 yards. He has 24 touchdowns, 8 picks. But Rice has JT Daniels there. Yes, that's the same JT Daniels that didn't he come out with like Justin Fields out of high school? He's been in college forever. He's closing in on 2,500 yards. This should hopefully be his last season of eligibility because he's been in college a really long time. But both teams can score. Both teams can give up some points. I have Texas State, though, getting the win, winning 31-28. They have a very solid offense, and I think that they will be able to beat the Rice Owls, but they won't cover that spread. In the final game that we're going to be looking at 9 p.m. on ESPN, we have 8-4 Kansas Jayhawks versus 9-4 UNLV. This is the guaranteed rate bowl. Kansas comes into this game as 12.5-point favorites here. That's a pretty big spread for bowl season, but these are two pretty good teams. So one team is trying to get to 10 wins, one team is trying to get to 9 wins. So as we move further along, the bowls are getting better. The records for every single team is slowly getting better. Kansas. Obviously, Kansas had a lot of hurt players this season. They have 3 different quarterbacks play. As of right now, they're probably going to be rolling with Bean at the quarterback position. But their main saving grace is Neal at running back. They can throw the ball when they need to, but they do try to keep the ball on the ground. But UNLV can also score a lot of points. So both teams have very good offenses. Looking at the team stats here, Kansas averages 33.6 points per game. That's top 30 in the country. UNLV averages 34.3 points per game. That's top 30 in the country. Both teams can score. Both teams average in the 30s as of right now. So they both have very efficient offenses. And on defense, Kansas gives up 25.8 points per game. UNLV gives up 27.0 points per game. So the teams are pretty evenly matched on offense and on defense. One, though, does come from the Power 5. One comes from the Group of 5. So one season was maybe a little bit harder. But no matter what, do not underestimate UNLV. They can score. They can score a lot of points really fast. What I have being the difference. So you have Mavia at quarterback for UNLV. You have Bean at quarterback for Kansas. The main thing that separates these two teams is the running back position. Kansas will be looking to keep the ball on the ground, run the ball down their throat. They have Neal at the running back position. He is looking to close in on 1,300 yards. He has 15 rushing touchdowns right now. That's the deciding factor right now. They played a lot of teams really competitively this year. They were ranked pretty much for the whole season. If they win this game in the final poll, they'll probably be back in the top 25. I have Kansas getting the win here. 34-23, so getting their 9th win, just not covering the spread. So that's where we are going to end it for part 2. So that means that part 3, we'll be picking up the Wednesday, December 27th games and looking at the next 10 games going forward. But that's our breakdown for part 2 bowl games. Hit that like button and subscribe. If you have any comments, drop it below and I will make sure to respond. Thanks.